You know what? I am super excited about today's show. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. Today, we are going to be discussing what I feel like is one of the, it's something we haven't really addressed on this show as much, but I think we've talked about youth and entrepreneurship several times, but really when you think about the inner city and these areas of our community that are, I'll call it underserved, and what can we do about helping create an environment that drives opportunity for these underserved communities, specifically our young people, but making sure that people who are maybe coming from a more disadvantaged area of our society still have the opportunity, the hopes and the dreams that the rest of us have. And today I have Dr. Gina Warren. She is somebody that, number one, she is her own success story, which is, that's what this show is all about. We're about sharing success stories. So today we're going to find out about Dr. Gina Warren's success in her own right, the way she's built a successful family, but simultaneously what she's doing to impact this problem that we all know is among us. And I think it's really the key to our future. So Gina, welcome to the Mark Haney Show. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, you bet. And I don't know if I did your introduction justice. I know you are, and maybe I'll ask for a little bit of help from you, but you run a nonprofit and you do a number of things. So maybe we could start by just having you sort of give your background, if you will, and where your areas of focus are today.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Gina Warren, and I grew up in the military. So I spent time overseas, and my father was in the Air Force 26 years. And so I ended up, our last move, if you will, was in Sacramento, and it was in North Sac. My father was at McClellan Air Force Base. So we ended up in what they used to call Westgate, and I went to school in Del Paso Heights. So I spent a significant amount of time in Del Paso Heights from 1977. And my husband and I are here now. He serves as a city councilman for this district, but it's an area that he and I met actually in middle school. And it's a place that's super near and dear to my heart. So I went to school. I left Sparks, Nevada from a really incredibly rigorous academic program there. And when we transferred to Del Paso Heights, it was difficult for them to find a place for my sister and myself because we were so far advanced academically. It really was my first awakening of what disparities look like in the inner city. And I was really, I was just astounded by how bad it was. The great thing was, it was the most incredibly spirited environment that I'd ever been in. And so, we stayed.
Can I stop you there for a second? What do you mean by spirited environment? How would you describe that more?
Well, for me, from my experience, we were in Sparks, Nevada, Reno from 1975 to 77. And at that time, it was a lot of racial tension, and we were not embraced. We had significant experiences with overt racism. And so it was not a place that was comfortable for us. It was not a place that was a happy place. So I dove deep into the academics because that's what kept me going every day. And so
So in Sparks, is a predominantly white community?
That's correct.
Okay.
That was correct. And so when we transferred, we went from like an all white to an all black environment. And, but it was like the first time I ever felt like, oh God, and I shouldn't say the first time because we were in the military. And so, but it was from that first 2 years in Sparks, now coming to Del Paso Heights. And it's like, wow, I'm in this great environment where people like us, and so it really affects your spirit as a young kid, because I was 12 years old. My sister was 14. And so anyway, going forward, I spent Del Paso Junior High School and then Grant High School. I graduated in 1983. and left for college. Went to Mills College for 2 years, and transferred over to UC Berkeley, where I finished there in 1989 with a degree in medical physics. I worked at Chevron for a short time, and then Clorox on research and development. And then I decided to apply to pharmacy school. And so in 1996, I graduated from UCSF with a degree in clinical pharmacy. I received a doctorate. I earned a doctorate from UCSF. There I did a postdoc training at a subsidiary of HealthNet, and I was working on developing clinical programs, or what they call disease management programs for diabetes and high cholesterol and things like that, and traveled a significant amount of time in different medical groups. And I saw more and more, as I wrote more and more, I realized that the emphasis just wasn't on quality of care. And I learned a ton, but the emphasis wasn't on quality of care. And so I went over to the county, and I really is where I saw, wow, the disparities are just palpable. And so when things changed at the county, when the Affordable Health Care Act came through, I was a consultant there, so I was the first to leave. So I said, well, this is my time now to co-found Neighborhood Wellness with a friend of mine, Marilyn Woods, a background in finance. She had a significant background in finance. And so with my clinical background, we decided to start Neighborhood Wellness Foundation. And initially it was to address health and wellness. And so quickly, as we dove into the grassroots work, we realized that adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma were at the root core of not just mental, but physical wellness. It was at the root core of educational attainment and building basic competency skills. And what we realize is that if we don't get to the core, then we're not going to change. We're not going to make an impact. And it's not rocket science, as we tell people all the time. It's just work. It is deep, digging hard work. But we are seeing a change. We are seeing mothers go from sleeping in the car to getting them stabilized into housing. And then when you're stabilized, then you're allowed to, you now have the ability to focus in on your educational attainments and job opportunities and employment. It's stability is the first line to addressing the trauma.
Yeah. So when you say at the core, you're talking about stuff as basic as a roof over your head, food on the table. Is that sort of the core? Or is it
that? No. Oh no, it's way deeper than that.
Okay.
It's the intangible complexities of poverty, Mark. Some people you don't realize. So let me give an example. When I talk about intergenerational trauma and poverty, that is our mission, is to disrupt that. So you've got legacies of incarceration. So I've got a young lady who her grandparents, her parents, her cousins, her aunts, her uncles, her siblings, and the father of her children have all been incarcerated. None of them had a high school diploma. And so when you look at her and you're saying, okay, well, she got in trouble, and if you don't get her history, then you have no idea, well, why is she doing what she's doing? To me, it's the same as you get medical history. They ask you family history, right? Have a family history of heart attack, diabetes, high blood pressure. If you don't ask the history, you can't strategically make an impact. How do you come up with a treatment plan without history?
And what age are you typically addressing these root problems? Are these young adults? Are these high school people?
So we have both. So we have 5 programs that we're working with high school all the way up to, we're working with people in their, we have a participant who's one of our elders, who's 90 years old. So we have our Sister to Sister program, which is our circle of healing as well as empowerment. And that's with our women as well as our young girls. We have our Innovators Academy, which is working with the lowest academic performing students, as well as those who are the most disruptive. We have a Reaching Higher Heights, which is educational attainment, working with high school students aged 22 and over. And we have an ASP program, which is alternative sentencing, and it's our SHE program, which is strengthening, healing, and empowering. And that has been recognized by the assistant district attorney, where we have a couple of young ladies who've been sent to us one in lieu of prison, one in lieu of jail. And then we have our annual Community Wellness Expo, where we bring resources that are relevant to our community to empower our community. So connecting them to not just mobile mammography and dental care and vision care, but also financial literacy information, educational attainment, reentry, things like that, STD testing. But what we're trying to do is build self-efficacy and self-sufficiency.
Yeah, and thinking about the root, we're talking about the root of addressing the root of the problem. And when you can't get there in time, or you can't make the impact that what you'd like to make, or in other areas, I mean, you're focused on Del Paso Heights for the most part, mm-hmm. right? So the areas that aren't able to do this, how does this manifest itself? Is this cycle just continue? Is that kind of typical? Is a cycle will sort of continue, and we have more incarcerations and more people that are unhappy?
Well, Mark, it's interesting because people will say, well, Gina, you're not, you did well. Your husband did well. I also had a different background, and I also had a different experience at home. And so what happens is that people look at that and say, well, they should be able to do that. But not everybody starts from the same baseline. Not everybody starts from the same starting line, if you will. And so what happens is that we have one young lady who she's been homeless since freshman year, and she graduated, and now she's going to be part of our AmeriCorps program. She's just resilient. She's just one of those special kids that no matter what's going to happen, she was going to make it. But the majority of the people don't. And so what happens is that, people want to know, well, why they're getting in trouble? Why are they, doing this and doing that? Well, if you live in an environment, every single day you wake up, you hear helicopters, you hear sirens, you are living in an area where there's illegal dumping. Somebody dumped an empty refrigerator right behind my house yesterday. If you live in toxicity every single day, you have no escape. There's not places that you can go to clear your mind, to come down from this chronic toxicity. And so what ends up happening is that it begins to affect your mindset. It affects you mentally. It affects your ability to engage academically. It keeps you in that flight or fright mode every day. And in those who have experienced that, when you're about to take a test or somebody scares you, your heart races and you get into that, you're scared and your heart pumps. That's normal. That's normal stress. But when you experience that day in and day out as a child, it actually affects your brain architecture. And so it also affects your immune system. And so what used to protect you is now fighting against you. And so we want people to understand that the work we're doing is also evidence-based just because of our clinical background. But you combine that with narratives, you combine that with everyday observation and listening to the stories of the people, and then you can strategically create programs that are relevant for the people who live there. So we build from the inside out and bottom up, not from the top down. Because if you are coming into a community without asking history, without understanding the historical challenges, it's very difficult to create programs that are going to be relevant.
Do you feel like that a lot of these young people either never have hope, or maybe they've lost their hope along the way? Because, I mean, we're sitting here talking about entrepreneurship and people dreaming about mm-hmm. doing great things on this show.
Absolutely.
We talk about that all the time, and people have these huge aspirations. Some people, they just want to buy their first house with their business, mm-hmm. but other people want to really figure out a way to make an impact that changes the world in some dramatic way. I would have to assume that people that have never been exposed to that kind of thing have a hard time even imagining that it's possible for them.
Absolutely. So what we try to do is give them positive experiences, because when you're inundated with positive experiences as opposed to negative, because they get more of the latter, then that positive experiences gives them something that's tangible. And so, yes, I think every child wakes up, is born with having a dream. but sometimes, the dreams get deferred in this day and age. What I'm noticing is what much earlier than it used to be. So these children at 3, 5 years old that are growing up in this neighborhood that are seeing so much of the violence, it's like you just want to survive. These are kids that also, if you pull them in and you get them to write, and they're writing poetry and they're writing songs and they're dancing and they're expressing themselves artistically, it's amazing what they can do. We've had a partnership with Square Root Academy 916 Inc. And what we've been able to pull out of these kids of building bridges, of creating circuits and doing science and technology, and then writing through a lot of their experiences. It's amazing what they're capable of doing. It's just a matter of resources. It's just like when we work with Jack Crawford and his son Jackson on an entrepreneurial club, and we did a 12-week module with them. The things that they created was amazing. Entrepreneurial things, like one of them did the voting, artificial intelligent voting. One of them did drones to address the, any like fire, for example, that we're dealing with now. They were coming up with all these different things that I remember Jack said at the city council meeting, said the only difference between Grattan High School and Del Paso Heights and Country Day was just a location, and was just resources. And
Wow.
so you pour resources into these communities, it's amazing what you will get from these children. But they're dreams that never get realized. They
Well, I
never
want to
get
dive
realized.
into that a little bit, if you don't mind, because
Yeah.
so for any listeners that we have that don't know who Jack Crawford is, he is the one of the founders of Impact Venture Capital. I happen to be an investor there. Jack's a good buddy of mine from the Entrepreneurs Organization. Jack introduced me to Gina. And our show is about entrepreneurship, but it's really around creating opportunity and how do we help the most people through a better understanding of what's possible. And so your particular story, I think, of your own success is key. But as you demonstrate what's happening with what can happen with our young people, I think maybe light bulbs will turn on for other parts of our region where they go, hey, you know what? We might be able to try some of the things that are working in Del Paso Heights or with, the Country Day School. Those things are things I might consider getting my school district to apply or, to try. So can we dive into that a little bit? Because
Absolutely.
talk about the age group and then what maybe the change from before or after, because I can imagine some of the success in hope building, right? And almost like, okay, wow. When you start saying Country Day is this private school where it's typically higher affluent people with successful families. And for us to sit here and go, wait a minute, the inner city can build the same or equal to or better entrepreneur at a youth level as can be this group that's had more of a privileged background. That's an interesting story.
Absolutely. Oh, it's an incredible story. And I appreciated that because Jack and Jackson, they came out and they were there every week and they saw the kids. And what was interesting is that, the difference is that, we feed our kids because a lot of times they don't have that meal. So it's hard to focus. So we always got to make sure that they brought food and then they can dive in and focus. I remember one time one of the gentlemen let one of our students borrow his blazer, his jacket, and it just took him at another level because he had a hoodie on. And he said he felt important. Because he looked at Jack, he would see Jack with his blazer on, and he's like, he looked at him and said, he must be important. And so when he put the jacket on, it just, his whole attitude changed. He was engaged. It was like those basic little things that matter to these kids that they never have experience with. They are literally living in a war zone. And people think that I exaggerate, but I'm not. When you're living in a concentrated area of poverty, and that's where you see the patterns. And that's what we want people to understand. What neighborhood wellness does is we look at patterns and you look at the mechanisms that cause those patterns. And you're saying that's how you strategically make that change. So these are kids that are not exposed. They don't have, a lot of them don't have basic competency skills. They don't have the same basic digital literacy skills because they don't have the software or the hardware Some of them have a hard time just going online because at Grant you don't have access to all the same information, and you don't have access points. You can't go home and get homework done because you don't have internet access. I mean, it's just those basic things, but the creativity that comes out of our students over here is unreal. It's just amazing just to watch and listen to them create and to build. When you tap in to into those brains of theirs, they want so much to thrive. They just don't have the access to do it. They have the ability. I mean, I think about Legos. I think about debate team coming out here. I think about, you know, them building, you know, writing, you know, they do write books with 916 ink, but there's so many opportunities to engage our students. The challenge though, Mark, is that what I want people to know is that when that 12-week is over, then they're back to the same life. And that's what I want people to understand. And so they're looking at them going, oh, you know, are you happy? You know, it's like, oh, no, because I'm back to the same thing. I go back to the same life because I can't change the physical landscape of this neighborhood. I can't change that. I can't change the poverty where people don't, we have 17% unemployment. We have 34% families live in poverty, up to 70% of single mothers living in poverty. And those are numbers, but those aren't the stories. And there's deep stories behind those numbers. And that is what I want people to hear and understand, is that, you know, mom can't help you with homework because mom doesn't have a high school diploma. And so it's like those type of things that I understand the value of needing internet at home, but that's an extra cost that they can't afford. But that's basic things that kids need to be successful. I've got a lady who can't read or write. She's almost 60 and the hardest working woman that I know. And all she wants to do is create a business plan because she provides in-home healthcare. She's phenomenal at what she does. But now she wants to do her own business. She wants to teach kids in the neighborhood a skill set. So when they graduate, they have something to do if they're not going to go to the college, because most of them can't afford college. And so if somebody were to say, okay, well, Gina, what do you need? It's like, okay, well, we look at matriculation. What happens if once they graduate from high school? Well, you know, you can't afford college and nobody helps you even fill out an application. So, you know, we've got to find a way to what's the next matriculation? Is it to vocational training? Is it to become an entrepreneur? Is it, you know, how do they become one if they don't even know how to create a business plan? Have ideas, concepts different than putting it on paper. Right?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So you think about Jack's program, or the program that worked with Country Day and the collaboration. You put together a 12-week program. I'm sure are some success stories. Sounds like there's some success stories coming out of there. And then it sounds like after that 12 weeks, they've been exposed, they've been enlightened to new possibilities. But then the continuation ends up being the breakdown. Are there avenues or things that are in the works that could help that progression?
Well, we are working on right now. We had a conversation with Safe Credit Union, and we were always looking at some interface with potential donors, funders. But we talked about a matriculation program, because in order for us to go to the next level, to the next step, we've got to deal with people who have already graduated from high school, and where are they going to go, or those who are adults now and want to do some entrepreneurial work. We are in need of resources. We are a staff of 6. My business partner and I, and since we started in 2015, have never taken a salary. We're hoping at some point when more funding comes in, we can do that. But what we've been able to do is employ people from the neighborhood, people who are boots on the ground, who are neighborhood navigators, who have become program managers in our ASP program, in our Reaching Higher Height, which is educational attainment program. We've got another woman who's a mentor and on the ground every day, identifying mothers who are sleeping in their cars, and so we connect them to housing. But it's about resources. It's about being able to have unrestricted resources so we can funnel it to the area that's needed. But we know that there's no way that we're going to break this generational poverty mark without an education and without educational opportunities and exposure. So let me give you an example. One of the young men who took second place, and I never told this to Jack because it just happened this summer. We've just been inundated since COVID, the mental health crisis since COVID, the neighborhood violence since COVID that just got magnified. He was shot at, and the person that was driving the car, he had left a dentist appointment, was on the other side of town, and I don't want to say the neighborhoods because it just gets complicated. But the young lady that was driving the car was killed, and he jumped out of the car and ran, looking for somebody to take him home. And so here's a kid standing up there talking about a program that he wanted to build for the schools, and it was I think it was a health program that was a digital health program, and he was shot at this summer, and it literally just takes my breath away because the exposure they have, they languish. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. We don't have areas. We don't have coffee shops. We don't have lunch, places that we can hang out. We don't have youth centers. We don't have those things. We just, since 2013, got water in the pools of the community center we haven't had for 13 years. There's just no outlet for the kids. And I tell you, if you engage them, I promise you they respond. We just don't have the consistent resources to get it done.
Is there any part of you? So I'm sitting here wondering, success in business, right? You're operating this business, and as I think about, obviously there's an enormous problem, and you're only tackling one component of it, or maybe you're tackling 4 or 5, 6 or 7 components of it. But sometimes narrowing a focus can make things more simple. And it sounds like you guys you have multiple programs and limited resources, and so that's kind of an interesting thing to me. It's like, is there any thought, like, if is it you feel like you're tackling the appropriate amount of stuff for the resources you have, or have you maybe is your focus too big? I guess would be a question.
Well, somebody asked that, and it's like, what happens is that they're all deeply intertwined. And so if you're looking at disrupting intergenerational trauma and poverty, those are deeply intertwined. But how do you address educational attainment unless you deal with the trauma? How do you address, massive incarceration if you don't deal with the trauma and the poverty and the educational attainment? Because 80% of people in prison are high school dropouts. They're all deeply intertwined. And so what we do is the programs that we have are still connected. So for example, our alternative sentencing with our SHE program, they are part of Sister to Sister, and they're also part of our high school program. Our Wellness Expo is only annual, but our other programs, Innovators Academy also works with our Sister to Sister youth that's also at Grant High School. So they what Innovators does is allows our Sister to Sister attend, because we also have young men in Innovators, where in Sister to Sister obviously it's just young ladies. But what we do is we address the trauma. You lower that barrier of adversity because it undermines learning. And so it's the same thing with the adults. You lower that barrier of adversity, and that means helping them stabilize in housing. Then they can engage in an educational attainment, because without that, they can't get the skill set to get a job. And so you've got some mothers who are still on government assistance, but you've got some women who the kids are older, they don't have government assistance because they don't get welfare checks. So they are looking for employment. They are looking to translate a skill that they use to survive into something that's legal and productive. But if you've never had that experience, I mean, we have women that say, I've never thought about anything that's not criminal because I've been surviving until now. It's like, this is the first time I'm actually thinking of what I could do with my life. But you don't have that until somebody exposes you to that. And it's amazing because the creativity that comes out in people who are survivors. They know how to survive. They can live off the land. They can find ways to make it, but they're not living. But when you start to tap into to what they can do, I've got someone who's the best hair braider in town, and I'm trying to get her connected to, give her that skill set, get her the cosmetology license, but she's never been to school, so you understand what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah. So thinking about, okay, so I'm sitting here going, I think any of us that hear these kind of stories and this kind of hardship and the kind of the amount that you have bitten off here, and we're sitting here going, if I was so inclined to be a part of this, I had time, I had talent, I had treasure. We want to invest into an area that you can sort of see outcomes and, be a part of
of
successes and things
course,
like that. You want to
of
be a
course.
part of the win. You want to experience the win
Yes.
alongside you.
Hmm.
Are there opportunities like that?
Absolutely.
What could you
Absolutely.
describe that?
So let me give you, for example, those who are business people who would like to host some sessions on creating business plans. Those who can provide some guidance on professional development and can sit one-on-one with some of our adults. Some who are interested in tutoring. We definitely need tutors or retired teachers to help us during this academic bubble, because we're distant learning, and we will create that academic bubble at our Clay Street site like they're doing at the NBA. We're trying to create these spaces where they can learn and focus and begin to develop habits. So they say, these are the habits I need to establish in order to become successful. And you have to do them over and over and over again to become a habit, right? And so we're trying to establish those habits. We're always looking for books, donation of books, especially for adults who are early readers. But we need, tutoring for adult literacy, for adult math. Well, it's basic math, but to tutor adults. But and of course, funding, so we can help pay the salaries of our neighborhood navigators, who are out there helping our mothers to stabilize. But we also have our neighborhood navigators that are helping with, to maintain the program for reaching higher heights of adult literacy and going back to high school. Everything that we do, we have collaborative partners. Highland Charter School has been a phenomenal partner for us, and that's the high school diploma completion. It's just that we have that cohort that's not ready to be in a larger environment. They're comfortable at Clay Street. Clay Street is in the heart of Del Paso Heights. It's across the street where people used to deal drugs, where sex trafficking happened. And we opened those doors. We are a community hub, and we take people in, and they love coming. They feel welcomed. And so we created this academic space and learning environment for adults, for young students. We do our sister to sister pre-COVID. We have healing circles there. We feed people when they come in to learn. But having just resources to help maintain that is always helpful.
Yeah. Can we talk about some of the success stories? So is there
Mm-hmm.
anybody you can walk me through? This person went through our program and came out, and now they are here?
So I mentioned LaDeja Lucky. We had her whole entire freshman year. She was homeless, so she didn't go to school. And so we got her sophomore year. And so the summer before her sophomore year, Grant High School administration was wonderful. They worked with her, got her doing, I think it's called Charge, where it's like an independent study online. So she got caught up. Well, when we got her in sophomore year, we started addressing those barriers of adversity and getting her Uber cards. So she had a job. So we'd get her transportation to her job. She'd have spending money to get some shoes or whatever, help pay the bills, help pay hotels. And here she just graduated from Grant High School. She got into Humboldt State and also to Tuskegee, but she didn't have the money. She refused to leave because her mom's still homeless. She's in a shelter. We have been working with her mom, been working with her sister and her little brother. And so she is now going to be our first high school AmeriCorps worker. So we have a partnership with AmeriCorps. So by having that partnership, LaDeja will get training that she needs in financial literacy, and there's just a mass amount of training that she'll get through AmeriCorps. She'll get an educational allowance, and then she will be able to apply to college. That's a huge success for us. Sharina was the one that's a legacy of incarceration. She finally graduated, is now in an 18-month program for medical assistance. She has 2 little girls. We have a young man who was in our Innovators Academy program. He is also going to be with us through AmeriCorps. He is an IEP student, which means he has a disability, a learning disability. And we worked with him through our Innovators Academy program. And he is so excited, his mother's excited, because he still needs to make a living and to get him the training that he needs. And we know that he's better orally than he is writing. And so we learned how to work with him and to tap into what his strengths are, and are now going to get him engaged where he'll get a paycheck every 2 weeks. And he will get training, and he will learn financial literacy. He'll learn about just basic life Casey skills that they get through AmeriCorps. And it's just phenomenal.
So I'm thinking of a couple of questions that, well, I'm thinking of 3 other topics that I want to make sure I at least address. But so the one thing that kind of goes through my mind is the role of the family in these troubled situations. Is this typically a situation where, look, the family is just over their head, or they've got more problems? You talk about people being incarcerated and maybe single mothers that are homeless. These kind of things. Like, well, the family is going to be less supportive, I can imagine, or zero support in those scenarios. And then also thinking about the support that comes from within, and community pride, if you will. Mm-hmm. You obviously have that. It's inspiring to me to know that, you moved back to the place where you were raised, where you experienced life, a new life, I suppose. And now you're trying to help that hometown. And much of the way I feel as well, I just didn't grow up in Del Paso Heights specifically, so I don't have that specific affinity because I've been to some Grant High School football games. That's really about it for me down there. But thinking to myself, is there enough support within the community and the existing families, or is this really an area where there's no support? There's very, very little support there in the immediate community, and somebody from outside of the immediate community needs to step in, because I love these alliances. I mean, I'd be an advocate of these different alliances that would want to sort of support you, because you can't be everything to everybody. But wondering what resources are in your own backyard.
That's a great question. There's phenomenal community support. It's what we call Pacer Pride, where you see a lot of Grant High School alum come back and do what they can to, whether it's supporting at a football game and helping buy uniforms, or it's to come and tutor, or it's to mentor one-on-one. A lot of our elders, for example, Mother Williams and Dorothy Hill, Mother Hill, they're both 90, or Miss Hill's almost 90. They set up voter registration. They actually have the 60-year-olds taking class and learning about why it's important to vote. There's so much of desire and spirit and energy. We lack resources. I mean, it's like you're looking in an area that's generationally impoverished, and low educational attainment doesn't mean that you don't work hard. You've got some of the hardest working people in this neighborhood. And so you're trying to instill that same work ethic with this newer generation who are impacted with different challenges. And so now you're post-crack epidemic, where a lot of the mothers who were involved, who got caught up in that, we didn't have the resources like you have in the opioid crisis. It literally devastated our community. I left in '83 to go to college. Del Paso Heights was it was the best neighborhood in the world. I used to ride my bike everywhere, sun up to sundown. We didn't have cell phones. We were gone all day. It was a neighborhood village. there were parents and like Mr. Ransom and my father-in-law, who I never got to have, is because he died in 78. But they used to pick up the kids and take them to Optimist games and, football and baseball games, and then drive everybody home. Because make sure everybody got home safely. It was literally a village. There was drill teams, there was cheerleading teams. Maddie Evans used to come to Del Paso Junior High School. I used to go to Saturday school for those who really wanted to go down that academic path. Mrs. Earl, there were so many people. And then the crack came through, and it literally wiped out our community. And so people who suffered from that, their mothers and grandmothers, they were also caught up as addicts. So these children that didn't get raised, their parents were addicts. So when they grew up, they didn't have basic competency skills. And so then they had children, right? And so now, and then their grandmother, though, were the addicts. So they didn't get to learn the things that they needed to learn, basic competencies and basic socialization skills. And so that is what I want people to understand, is that when you understand the history, you understand historically what happened. It's not what's wrong, it's what happened. And then you can now become strategic and saying, how do I come in and provide service or resources that's needed, and not things that just look good so you can say, oh, I checked the box off, but things that will actually transform lives. And an educational pathway transforms lives. Having housing stability transforms lives. A matriculation program out of high school transforms lives, because now they'll have employment or they'll have a pathway to college. But we need pathways, and we need people to help them walk through those pathways, because they don't have that. My kids are all in college. It was a difficult process to do the Common Apps and all of that stuff. But we have a background. I have a doctorate degree, but I also was able to help somebody pay somebody to help my daughter go through this process, because we were so busy working. And so we had the resources. But when you don't have those basic resources, you are stuck there. And so all these kids that want to go to college don't have the means to get there.
So
And so we want to make sure, no, we just want to make sure we can help them.
Yeah. And thinking about where are we at? If we're, if this was a football game, there's things that sort of trend. Sometimes it feels like you're gaining ground, and other times you're losing ground. Pendulums sort of swing. Are you at a point where, I know there's some wins happening, but we spent a lot of time talking about the problems, somewhat talking about the wins, but are we losing ground right now? Is the pendulum still swinging in the wrong direction?
Well,
or have we started swinging back the right way yet?
Well, you got COVID, so it made a significant impact. When you are working face to face with a community in great need every day, and then all of a sudden nothing, we definitely went backwards with a lot of people. We did get some funding to be able to deliver essentials. Sacramento Regional Foundation was phenomenal, so we already get those resources, but those are right then and there. But that mental health piece was so significant. You've got social isolation, and it allows you, I don't know why our brains go there, but you start to think of all the worst things possible when you're socially isolated, when you're idle, when there's nothing to do to engage in positively. My kids are all very strong academically. When they had to come home and finish school during COVID, it was very difficult for them to distant learn. You're at that age where you need that socialization. And but they finished, but they had a support system. I created an environment for them to engage, because that's what they're used to. But if you don't have that system in place, it is so challenging. You don't have access points, you don't have internet, it's like you're not eating. So we did go backwards, but this also gave us an opportunity to start focusing in, responding to proposals, and diving into now scale. Start to think about scaling what we're doing by identifying resources to allow us to do that, to create academic bubbles in different areas beyond Clay Street, to partner with other folks, to have strong collaborative partnerships, because you can't make it without that. You have to have collaboration that's authentic and that share a common mission. But I feel like we are on the right path. We're definitely on the right path because we're seeing success, but we also, you notice your impact, not just when you're doing it, it's when you're not able to do it. And you see people falling backwards. You say, we know the work we were doing was making a difference. And so now we're dealing with COVID. So now we have to be creative. So we just restarted our sister to sister mental wellness piece on Tuesdays on Zoom. We've had 29 attendees on the Zoom. It was phenomenal. And women excited to get back next Tuesday and to get back next Tuesday so they can engage and learn skill sets, protective factors of coping with these mental challenges and the violence in the neighborhood, and you know, directing them to educational pathways, because we've got the older generation on there. You've got the mothers who are 90, and you've got the young mothers raising these kids. Many of the mothers on the call with Healing 5 have lost children to gun violence. So you've got these different women with different experiences, but are connected through shared life experiences. And so we're learning from one another and we're growing. And so, yes, we are making an impact. It's just that it's slower when you can't scale. It's slower when you don't have the resources. But the passion and the desire to get it done is unquestionable. It's unwavering.
We have a few minutes left, and so, I want to make sure I give you a chance to sort of wrap up, closing thoughts and things like that. But one of the things that you said at the beginning, I kind of put a mark on my mental note that I wanted to get back to this because, I haven't walked in your shoes. Okay. So here I am. I live in Placer County. I grew up here in Placer County. I grew up in Roseville. I live in Loomis. I have not walked in your shoes, but I have spent time in African-American Black churches over the last year, pitch events associated, and been so inspired by the community that it sort of builds in these African and Black communities. It's very inspiring to me to walk into these rooms when I'm the minority, right? I walk in and I'm the minority. And in some ways it's, it's been a little bit intimidating, I'll admit, but I've never come away more inspired than I have when I've been associated with a few of these events. And I've done a little bit of mentoring and a little bit of things in my zone's entrepreneurship, right? So that's kind of where I spend my world. But when you talked about moving from Sparks into Del Paso Heights and experiencing the racism or the difference, the culture shift from racism to maybe a place where you felt that you fit in more. I sit here and go, you know what? These are areas where I've touched on these on our show a few times because there have been people that have experienced racism, and it's hard for me to understand that. I guess other than I'm trying to understand it, but it's hard for me to get it like you could get it. Where are we at on that right now? Obviously, George Floyd has heightened all of our awareness. That whole incident has got the whole world abuzz, talking about it, maybe wanting to question within themselves, what have I done? What really kind of rethinking, have I been, I guess I've been missing it because, I didn't notice it or I didn't do anything about it. Didn't notice it to the extent that it exists. And so as I sort of admit that, I guess I don't get it. I'm wondering, where are we at on that front in your mind? Or the progress that's being made? Is it helping right now? Is it creating the right kind of conversation?
I think it is. It was creating conversation because it never did. And so it's okay, Mark, that you don't get it because you can't. You're not Black. So it's anybody who's not Black. It's you can't understand a Black experience. And so I think the biggest thing for me as a Black woman is that it's been negated. And so that is the biggest challenge, is that when you've been screaming from the rooftop for so long, for decade after decade, it's the same story my father had, my grandfather had, his father. And then somebody finally says, because it's in front of your face, wow, is that really happening? Well, how long has that been happening? It's like it's been happening my entire life, and my children's life, my parents' life, my grandparents, and so on. And so what is always important is that we engage in authentic conversation about really what it is. And so when you are living as a Black person, and every day you feel like, because you walk into a Black church and you're a minority, well, in our world, that's our experience every day. And
Yeah.
so you, in your mind, it's like you've gotten almost accustomed to people just not liking you. Or why are you wondering why you're here? I experienced it in school. I mean, I had overt racism in Reno, but when I got to college, it was like people were looking at me when I'd be in upper division science classes or physics classes, and they're looking at you like, what are you doing in here? Like, are you in the right class? Or my counselor telling me that I should change and not get it, not take sciences because she didn't think I would survive, because she didn't think I would make it. And I'm glad that I didn't listen to her. But it's those experiences that you have over and over again. And sometimes they're what people call microaggressions. Sometimes it's very overt. But I want people to understand, and I can speak for me, is that it just beyond George Floyd. It's about the redlining that happened when we were not allowed to buy homes and purchase homes and to build wealth. So I started sending out YouTube videos of redlining, and people were like, oh my God, I never knew this. It's like when you begin to understand what happened historically and why Black people are still in the positions that they're in, people are like, well, they're just not working hard enough. It's like, oh my God, it's like, we're coming from the negative. You're almost like in a deep ditch and you're trying to climb just to get to ground level. And then you get smashed back down. And over time, that hopelessness just overwhelms you and you get frustrated, you get angry. And I try to explain that to a lot of people. When I was working in the clinic, I knew how to deal with my Black mothers, because the anger a lot of times is a manifestation of pain and frustration, of perpetual hopelessness. And so you're living a life that you don't see any out. And it's like every time you try to apply for a job, it's like you can see, it's like most people aren't going to hire somebody Black. You go into an elevator, they think you're going to rob you. I look for my sons, I'm thinking that something's going to happen to him, because I got one son that's very dark, and he's a 4.37. But it's like when he has braids on a hoodie, nobody sees that. They see his Black skin. And I want people to begin to open and have open dialogue. I think a week after, a friend of mine, Ann Hardy, who her kids were in school with my kids, we came to my backyard, social distance, but we had a very open and very painful and honest dialogue about how we feel, how the mothers in my neighborhood feel versus the women that my kids went to private school with. It's a different world. It's a world that's so incredibly different. But yet my kids had that same racial feeling, racism, when they were at the private school, and didn't want to tell us because they didn't want to leave the school, because where else were they going to go? And so then as a Black person, you have to decide, am I going to do what my father did? Take us out of this academically strong environment and put us in a place that we feel embraced, that we feel loved, we're feeling good about who we are. And so our confidence goes through the roof. Or do you get that academic background because you have to have it in order to be successful, to get better jobs, to get better opportunities to go to college, which my kids got. But then I also knew that I had to engage my kids in places that embrace them culturally. It's a challenge every single day. Do I feel hopeful? Absolutely, I feel hopeful when I see these young folks out there fighting. I see older people saying, God, what did I do to contribute? How do I get, how do we fix this? It's not about fixing as much as it is about recognizing, and then what can we do to start building back these impoverished communities that have been impacted by redlining, where these schools are dilapidated, where these kids got to go to school where there's no bathroom doors, there's no running water, there's no soap, they don't have knee pads when they're playing volleyball, they don't have football jerseys, they don't have basic things, they have old books that pages are missing. How do you feel every day when you're exposed to this, and this is all you have, and then you go visit a school like Vista Del Lago, or you go to Granite Bay High School and you're going, well, damn, it's like, is this what I deserve? It's like, what did I do wrong? You didn't do anything but be born into poverty. It's just as somebody's privilege didn't do anything differently. You didn't do anything wrong, but you didn't do anything right. You just were born into that, and that's what your exposure has been. And I want people to understand, if we stop looking to point fingers and say, What do we do to fix this problem? I'm solution-based, Mark, and I want us to begin to identify solutions. How do we fix this? We've got some our kids are incredible, but people can't see beyond their black skin, as if there's something wrong with their black skin. I want them to love the skin that they're in, and for people to see, not be colorblind, see that black skin and say, wow, let me see your greatness too. Because that is what's been missing, is that you can't see beyond it, because everything you associate with black skin, whether it's been in the media, whether it's been in the news, whether it's been in the movies, nothing has been positive. Everything from the historical books has been negative. And we don't see victors in black. We only see slavery and mass incarceration. We don't, and even you don't see heroes. I mean, so when Black Panther came out, everybody rushed to the theater because it's like, wow, we finally got a black hero. But it teaches you every day in your mind, something's wrong with those black people over there, because they're always, everything that they do is wrong. And you begin to believe that, but everybody around you believes that. And so here we are with an opportunity to change this narrative and to change the lives of people who've been living in these horrible environments.
Well, Gina, I couldn't agree more, and that you are leading is inspiring, I think, to a lot of us, and me beginning to, start conversations like this, and I'm sure it won't be the last. And if there's any ideas that you have for me regarding entrepreneurship, which is sort of my lane, if you will, I would embrace that continued conversation. And I think many of my friends would also embrace the idea of, helping in the zones where they feel like they could add the most value. Because I agree with you. This is, I call it the power of with, right? With Gina Warren, with the entrepreneurial community.
Oh, absolutely.
With a few other, the Jack Crawfords, maybe me, maybe other people. Like, look, we can make a big difference, and we can't solve it all ourselves, but we can make a big difference. And really, it's one person at a time, one success at a time. And to me, as those success stories begin to get shared and become more tangible, then we will see that pendulum swing back in the right direction. And hopefully, we don't have to wait generation after generation for that to happen. We can make an impact on yours and my watch, right? So let's do something today while you and I are still, have enough gas in the tank to be a part of it.
Yes, agreed.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. How can people get in touch? What's the best way? Like, if people hear this and go, okay, I want to know Gina, maybe here's an idea. They want to just open themselves up to the conversation. Is there a best place to reach out to you, or a social media spot?
Yes, first I would love for them to visit our website, which is neighborhoodwellness.org. My email is gwarren, my last name, WARREN, at neighborhoodwellness.org. You can check out our Facebook page at Neighborhood Wellness. And my number is 916-335-8818. That's 916-335-8818. But we are always open for dialogue, for discussion, for ideas, and for support.
Okay. Gina, I want to thank you for sharing your story. And I really thank you for what you're doing when, so many people with your kind of success might think about resting and enjoying the success. And I'm sure in some ways this is an enjoyment for you, but I mean, it's work too. It's I'm sure there's blood, sweat, and tears that goes into this effort. Any business build has that same thing. And so we thank you for, the efforts that you make, and, we salute you for what you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.